Welcome to the webinar about TMS FNC Chart. Before we start, I would like to ask everybody if they can see me and also if the audio is there. So just give me a brief feedback in the chat, which is the leftmost icon on the right corner. Okay, Peter, thank you. Okay, here. Perfect. I hope you like my fancy background here, appropriately for charting. So that's kind of neat. Okay, so if everybody's ready to go, we don't waste any time because we've got lots of exciting content to carry. In case you guys don't know me, I'm Holger. I basically jumping in for Bruno, who is the regular FNC chart expert. And so I'll be doing my best to present just as good as he usually does about TMS FNC Chart. And it's a universal charting solution from TMS software. And universal in this case means you can use it across all the platforms and across all the IDEs that TMS supports. That's what makes it so magic, because you can use the same code base for different platforms. That makes it such an attractive solution, because it definitely is a positive solution to decrease your development cost and maintenance. Okay, before we go ahead, I have a filter, an AI filter installed on my microphone. But in case you hear some hammering or screaming because somebody falls off my roof, we're getting a new roof right now, so apologies for that. There was no way to time this. We had like a whole week of rain last week, and they had to move it over to this week. So, but going into hurricane season without a roof is also not a good idea. So apologies for that. And also a brief disclaimer. Nobody's perfect, but all the mistakes are mine and mine only. It's not the product. It's not the engineering team. If I mess up, it's me. Get in touch with me. And because all the demos have been properly tested by the team. And if you have questions, please use the chat. And there's also a separate tab. If you're new to TMS Web Academy, there's a separate tab for questions. It's right next to the chat. And I have support from the TMS team that your questions surely will go noticed and will be answered. And I'll glance on the list as well. If something fits into the train of thought that I just have, I'll include that into presentation live. And if it's a little bit more extensive, I'll also give a little bit more detailed information about everything. Okay, you can also raise your hands, but that's please at the end of the session, if there is a Q&A going on. I would say post your questions in the text form, and then I'll deal with that at the end if it doesn't fit into the presentation. Okay, key features of FNC Chart. TMS always had a wide range of chart types. And the new thing, I'll come to that later a little bit, is that before you had to set a couple of properties in order to get the chart type that you wanted. And now with the new version, there's different components for all the different chart types. So it's gotten even easier. And it is cross-platform, cross-framework. And cross-platform, of course, meaning you can use Windows, macOS, the mobile platforms that Delphi supports, meaning Android and iOS. And that, of course, spans to frameworks. You can use the VCL if you want to create Windows applications, but you have to use FireMonkey if you want to support macOS, iOS, Android. And of course, there is also stuff like the Raspberry Pi. It's highly customizable, and that means there is a way to start off with very little detail. What you will see today, I'll start you off with a little example, but it is customizable to the least dot, basically. You can customize all the different markers, all the different text. So there is a wide range of customization options, but now with version 2.0, you can start off really, really easy and improve in steps to make your chart more attractive for your end users. And there's many ways, various ways to bind to your data. And that's what I'll focus on today, because like, what good is a chart component if it looks good, but you're unable to present the information that you want to bring over to your audience? So that's the focus for today. And something that was added recently, not even with version 2, but with already version 1, there is a bridge to the TMS Analytics and Physics package that allows you to plot functions like sine, cosine, and also very custom functions. And even if you have, that's the power of TMS Analytics pack, if you have a function, you can build the derivative or the integral and what all fancy math stuff there is, and you can plot the result in a chart. And there's a direct mapping component that you can drop on the form, and then you can link your function to the chart. That might be something we'll look at another day. And I think Bruno already has a blog post up on that, so Google for that. I'm sure there's a blog post for that. So first of all, let's look at a couple of types of charts that are in here. We have pie and donut chart types, which are here. You see the customization options using emojis or glyphs for the different categories. And here you not only have a pie chart, which is one of the biggest criticism of pie charts, because if you look at the left, it's very difficult to see if, for example, the pants are bigger or just as big as the t-shirts. It's hard to see. And for that, you also have the different pie chart, which is basically, by the way, funny, I use the American term, and here's shorts and shirts, okay? So here you also see the length of the pie segment as a means to signify how much the percentage is. And then if you look on the right, you can clearly see that there's a difference between the red and this one, for example. But here, it doesn't seem that way. So it is much better to see the percentages that way. Some chart products don't even have pie charts anymore because of this effect here. So, and of course, I'll have to jump over. The donut chart, of course, is if there's an empty space in the middle. Okay, so area chart type. Very informative right here for different areas that have different transparency if you want to, so you can see the overlap between them. Legends are automatically generated. So area charts, bar charts, and this already shows multiple customization options. You can assign certain annotations to certain bars. You can here, you see the x-axis doesn't have any denotation. All the denotations are inside of the bar with a little bit of opacity going up, or the transparency becoming less and less and less if you go up the bar. And then here's another annotation with a glyph image. And here a custom axis with custom unit. So it's not just like 10, 20, 30, but you also added the unit. Yeah, cross-platform here is another slide, which are available. I didn't focus on that before. So the frameworks are VCL, FireMonkey, I talked about those, but of course, LCL is in there as well. And the big one, TMS Web Core. So everything you build for the desktop, you can also use on the web. And TMS Web Core, if you remember, has TMS Miletus, and TMS Miletus offers you desktop applications on all these platforms as well, but also in addition, the Raspberry Pi, for example. So you're pretty well covered. Also the IDEs, look at all the IDEs here. So we have Delphi, C++, we have Red Studio and Lazarus and Visual Studio Code. I talked about it being highly customizable. While it's the same at the same time, it is in the beginning, and I admit this, a little bit overwhelming, but, and this is the advantage of the new version, you can get started without looking at these deep customization options at all. However, this is something I found out rather recently. If you have a charting framework and you have specific customer demand, for example, please point out our number one, two product inside of the chart, you can do that with these customization options and are not like bound to any specific thinking of the charting network, of the charting framework. You can do and decide everything yourself. Data mining, this is what we'll focus on today. We have, as the big one, JSON. If you're not that comfortable with JSON yet, there is a, not making an advertisement for myself here, but that will get you started. There is a how it works with Holger, also on the TMS channel, about JSON documents, what they are, how they work. You're probably more familiar than with CSV, comma separated files, and they're tied to Excel. That's why here is the Excel logo in there. And they are basically, the main characteristic is you have different columns, and the first line in the file most likely will contain the name, the attribute names for each of the different columns. And then there is a separator, comma separated. It should be a comma. However, there's also people that speak of a comma separated file if the separator, for example, is a tabulator or something else, even though formally it would be a TSV. But you know, this works all, because you can, with TMS charts, you can specify the separator. You could also, it's also pretty smart when it comes to the line endings, because CSV is very, very popular for machine learning, and all the information is then output into comma separated files. And those systems usually have a Unix, Linux background, and the line endings are different, you know, but FNC Charts takes care of all of that. I tried it with a Linux file. It worked just fine with the line endings. And of course, I think this is rather, it's not new, but this has gotten some love for the 2.0 release, data bindings for databases, dataset, client datasets, and for the grid adapter, which is part of FNC as well. So this is the TMS Analytics bridge with a concrete example. There is human beings on this planet that can read this. For me, this is some sort of sine, cosine formula, and that's all I see. I also recognize pi, but I have no idea what this function denotes. But you can see how great it is. You have the different points, the values, and the charting component also calculates the trend line in between the polynomial that is supposed to be the trend line. So unlike Excel, for example, well, in the meantime, Excel, I think, can do it, but in the beginning, Excel could only do linear trend lines. This is a nicely fitted curve that looks really, really great, and is not much work to do. As said, there is a blog post available for that. And now to the features that are new in 2.0. And I was given the opportunity to look at that pretty early before release, and I was blown away what the guys did. Especially the appearance was one of my biggest wishes that had been considered, because I found it pretty difficult to get started with a certain appearance right away. And now we have color sets. The colors are also based on academic research that the colors are distinct, meaning if you have 3 series and then you don't have like a light blue, a dark blue, and a blue in the middle, which makes it hard to distinguish all the different series. And instead you have like If it's a blue, you have a red and the yellow, for example, if you have 3 series. And all these things are also based on, as I said, it's very academic. It's like there's been books written about this topic, how to choose colors for a chart. TMS did some great work there to make sure that you have a great list of colors available, which are very likely to distinguish and are also working great for current color themes that are used on the web, for example, so that you have immediately a good look and feel for your charts. In global font config, that is something very great. Usually you have a font for the title, you have a font for the axis, you have a font for the other axis, you have a font for the different markings. And with global font config, you say, I want to use, I don't know, JetBrains Mono as my standard font. And then the charting component uses that font for everything, but also scales it appropriately, meaning the title will be bigger than the axis labels. And you can affect the scale and the base font, and everything will be scaled accordingly. It's great. And loading data from file has become much easier. You can now load from file, stream, array. Also something I said I like about charting solutions, if you can get values into your chart quickly, just assign an array, and boom, you've got your visual representation of your array, which is very, very useful for you end users. JSON and comma-separated files. And data binding, by the way, if you hear this for whatever reason, my MacBook keeps pinging on the left. I'm going to shut it down now, even though I set the speaker is off. It's still pinging away whenever I get a notification or something. I don't know what that is. Okay, so let's go into the examples. I think I've talked enough just showing you slides. I think it's time to show you really, really what this can do. So I'm going to start with the appearance, the initial series colors. You see how nicely distinct they are. This is not distinct, but this is called the monochromic. You know, well, I'm not a native speaker. I'm sure somebody who had English as a native language is able to pronounce it better. And here the global font, where you can specify the name, the scale, and the size, and the font, the style, which is bold here, and then all the properties adjust accordingly. And then here in detail, I already jumped over it. You have methods for all these, and there's multiple overloads available. So this is only one, but there is multiple overloads. I'll show you in code, so I'll jump over this slide. And same with the database, data binding with database and grid adapter. The key thing here, and this is something I had to get used to, you can auto-create the series, meaning the adapter looks at your database and will auto-create the series, or you can create everything manually. And you have events to fully customize the binding, how to map fields to a point, fields to a series, and then also it is sometimes difficult to determine the field type depending on a database field. For example, there's, just to give you an example, there's lots of databases that just have an integer number for the date time, and this could be epoch time, Linux time, and you would be able here to transfer that into a T-date time and stuff like that. So that's all possible. Okay, let's go to code, and let's hope Delphi is willing to create a new VCL project. Okay, good, that worked. And this is the first time doing a live webinar with this virtual machine, so there might be some hiccups. Let's look what's there. So the FNC chart has now become a much, much bigger category on your toolbar. Unlike before, where there was the TMS FNC chart, there is now, in addition, all the different chart types. For example, you have a line chart. And immediately you recognize the different colors, how nicely distinguishable they are. And let's take, for example, a bar chart because it's better for you to see when we transmit it here in the webinar. Right here, let's set it to, of course, alignment is available, anchors are available. Let's align it to client, poof. And by default, you have two series defined, so you immediately get a great view on the colors. These are the default colors, but where do they come from? And this is where the new appearance property comes in, which allows you with these properties that you saw on the slide very, very quickly to make a very big change to the chart. For example, the color scheme right now is based on the color list. Color list is a list of colors right here. And these colors are specified. You can simply select them. And if you go through the color list, this is the blue, red, dark blue, purple, yellow kind of thing, art. They're all distinct and chosen according to best distinction of different series. So that is something you can choose, and you have as many series as you have colors defined. And of course, if you reach the end of the list, it's going to start at the beginning again, I would assume. But by default, you have 10 colors. Who has more than 10 series in a chart? If you have more, you can either add more colors, or if you don't like that at all, there is also the Excel standard color set based on, I would say, looking at the colors. This is at least a later version of the MS Office products like Office 365. Or if you don't like Excel either, there is the monochromatic. And this is where the blues look similar, but there's a gradient on there of some sort. And you can select the base colors, like this is a blue. Let's take a tan, see, like very nice. It's hard to distinguish, I would think, over the wire, looking at this webinar, but this is light and this is dark. Personally, when I went to college, I learned to use these distinct colors like these. So because some things to remember is regarding colors, number one is there might be people who need visual aids when it comes to colors, like red-green deficiency. So you should never pick red and green in the same chart. This color list takes care of that. If you don't have red and green as comparison, which looks the same to some people. And also, the color list allows you to do something that is very valuable if you write for software for an international audience. So this color list is written for the Western market, like United States, Europe. But if your software is also being published in the Eastern market, for example, China, Japan, they might have a different interpretation associated with color. For example, a lot of people don't realize if we look at stock, green for us, which we see seldom these days, green means stock go up. Red means stock go down. Well, if you're in China, green means stock go down. Red means stock go up. With the color list, you're able to do this because Delphi, you can create the locale of your application, and according to that, you either pick red, green, or green, red. You can do that very, very easily with these kind of things. Okay, global font. Right now, it's the standard font from the form, but I like a monospace font, so I'm going to use JetBrains Mono. And now everything is in JetBrains Mono, but 40 plus, age 40 plus, I need it a little bit bigger, so 12 points, and that's how easy it is to adjust the size and font type. And now you could, if you wanted to, add specific, like you could make certain parts bigger and smaller, but the general thing is set. That's the key point here, that you don't need to go into all these properties in order to get a general view on the chart. Okay, from there, I think we looked at the biggest new feature, the appearance property, and now I have a demo to show. And thank you to the team for parent that. Okay, so the demonstration will show how to load data from different data sources. The chart is one of the new types. It's the TMS FNC line chart. And if you're wondering how we showed this amazing customization options, how do I get there? Well, you simply double click on the chart and that will open up the designer with all the different options that are there. Okay, cancel. And key is you have a chart, you drop that, and then you need to drop, if you want to use the database functionality, which binds the database adapter to a data source, you would need to drop a database adapter. There is also the grid adapter, which is not shown here because there is no grid. And of course, you would need some sort of T data set, which is a descendant, which is a client data set here, but it could also be, hopefully I'm not saying something wrong, but I think ADO, also even ADO has like a T data set. And of course, all the FireDeck queries, all the FireDeck tables, everything is a T data set. So you would be able to use this data source and this data adapter for everything. Good. Let's start with the simple stuff with the array. So we start the demo. And I click load from array. And the data is being loaded out of an array. And it's just sample fictional data just generated by random by the team or entered by random by the team. We have a max temperature, a minimum temperature, and just 2 lines with dates. The same information read from a comma-separated file. Then information read from JSON. And then from the data set, it's always the same kind of random info. And let's look how we can implement that, because the array, in my opinion, will blow you away because it's gotten really, really easy compared to version 1, in my opinion. But so the default options for the X values, that's something we do, is that we want date time on the X axis. That is something that you can't guess. Why can't we guess that? Well, think about what date time is in Delphi. It's a double value. So it's really, really tough for a charting framework to decide what it is. And if you think like, well, why don't they do RTTI and look into the type if it's a T-day? Well, it's not standardized. There's T-day, T-day time, and then you can create your own aliases. So this is a good solution. And then you can call load from data array. And we have a couple of parameters here. First of all, the series index, like which index does the data refer to. So we have 2 series, minimum, maximum. So we specify 0 first and then 1. And then the second parameter are the values for the y-axis, the actual values. And these are the actual x values, meaning the dates. And this is what is being done. Date utils is included, so that's why we can say nice today -6, basically 6 days ago, 5 days ago, 4 days ago. And then here you have the values for those just entered by random. And this is what I love about you see that this has been done by somebody from the team that developed the framework, because load from data array returns a reference to the series that has been added. So you can actually, if this is of a series, you can actually do dot, and in the same line, add the legend text. Of course, doesn't hurt if you were to declare a variable, make that a series, and then assign more properties. But as we just want to assign one property, the legend text, perfect. That's the way to do it. And same for the other data array, same thing. And it will add a new series, because if in case it doesn't exist, the series will be added. That's also something nice about all these load functions. If the series that are there don't exist, they will be automatically added. So you don't run into an index out of bound exception if the index here doesn't exist. I'm not seeing any questions so far, so I'm not doing that badly explaining it. Comma separated is the same thing in a way, okay? But there is one major difference. We need to tell the charting framework how the file looks, because as I said, there's quite different incarnations of comma separated files. And this is what we have the default load options for that we used before. Let's look into default load options. It's of type TMS FNC Chart load options. And there, code completion tells us that we have, as I said, the delimiter. So this could be comma, tabulator, and the first line. What does the first line look like? And this is not just like a template or something. This is I would think it's an enum value. Let's see if we can jump in there. Yes. So that means the first line already has values, meaning you need to specify the labels for it manually. I want you to skip the first line because it's a comment. That's also very, very popular. There's like a comment and saying like, hey, this file describes blah, blah, blah. And then this line is the one that I think we're going to use because the first line is the label. Well, let's look at the file, what it looks like. This is the comma separated file that we're going to use. And clearly, we have in the first line, we have the day, max temperature, minimum temperature, mean temperature, rain, wind, sunshine. I think that is the duration of, I would think, the duration of sunshine, the wind strength, the mean temperature. Yes, sunshine is literally the duration. And the date is not a double value. It's not an integer value. It's also not one of the ISO values, because if it were ISO, it would be in reverse order. This is a specific date value that is being used. And FNC Chart allows you to, while loading your CSV file, you can specify that by passing format settings. Basically, in this case, the format settings, because this is supposed to be compatible for previous Delphi versions, the global format settings are being changed. And if I remove my line here, we say for the date separator, we use the dash. The short date format is date, date, month, month, year, 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 year. And if you look at it, that is something you need from the creator of the file. You couldn't guess. Well, you can guess as soon as you go. If you go here, this is the day and this is the month. So because it's 16, it can't be the month. That's the way to guess. But if you only had like days below 12 or up to 12, you wouldn't be able to guess what is the day and what is the month. So, and here the decimal separator, very, very important, because the decimal separator in Europe most of the time is a comma. And I don't know what Microsoft was thinking when they implemented this, that they would create a comma separated file with a comma. There's also instances of comma separated files with comma, and then the numerical values have like quotation marks. It's absolutely horrible. So, but here in this case, it's very easy. We have a period. So this is all we need. And then we can call load from CSV data. And if we go here, let's invoke code completion. That's Control Shift. And of course, the file name has to be supplied. And then you can supply the load options if you don't want to use the global ones. Here we use the chart and modify the default load options of the chart. So we don't need to specify that here. So the default load options are being used. So the overload that is being used is actually this one, the second one. So we specify the, what is it called? I don't want to give the wrong name because it was renamed recently, the Y value column indices array. So what does that mean? Every element in this array points to the column inside of the file. So if we open up the file again and make it view always on top, that means number one. So we start at 0, 0, 1. So we have as the first value series or value series values, we have the column number 1 with the index 1, which is the second column. And then we have the third column with the index 2, which is the minimum temperature. And here on the right, we have the, right here, we have the X value column index. Where do our X values come from? Well, 0, which is the date, and it's X value, the X-axis, it's one X-axis, and all the Y-axes will be put on those. So you have one of those, that's why there is no array, and we have two value series. And the interesting part is that here we specified that for the X values, we have date time. So with the additional format settings, that's all it takes for Delphi to understand this date and to plot it according to what is given in the file. So those are the comma-separated values. Next are the JSON values that I showed. And what TMS uses here is the return from a web service that gives us the weather of London. So this is literally something that might come back from a web service. For example, if you use the new Apple Weather Kit and you get JSON back, this is something that you would get back. I think this is more like some other weather API, I don't know which one, but you get like the city and all that kind of stuff. So the location, but here are the current conditions, for example. And when you go down, here's the forecast for the day. And then in the forecast of the day, you get the date. And you get, again, you get like the temperatures. And TMS allows you, while importing that, to really dig into the structure of your JSON, you know, because it's like, it's not a tree, it's a tree structure, which goes deeper and deeper and deeper. And you have like forecast day here. And I hope, yeah, there is all the different temperatures on the day on different times. And the time, again, is given as in a special format. And it's also given in epoch time, which is the time since, I looked it up recently, 1970 seconds. And this is something I didn't know. I found out while looking it up. There's actually two kinds of epoch time. There's epoch time seconds still till 1970, and then there's milliseconds till 1970. So if you say epoch time, it doesn't suffice. You have to say if it's the one with seconds or milliseconds. Interesting side hint. Okay, so if you have the structure, the load from JSON data has many overloads. First is always the file name. And the second one, hello, are once again the load options if you want to. Of course, alternatively, we could have modified the default load options of the chart and had used this overload with the series name right away without the load options. But this time we opted for specifying the load options inside of the call to load from JSON data. And we created the load options first. And then we say, what is the format type for the X values? It's date time again. And here we can say, what is the X values format string? It's HH, which is hours. And I think, yeah, it's hours. And then the X range and Y range are being configured. These are things that are not easily to, basically there's AR enabled means that the range is, as it says, enabled, and that the Y range uses common values that are determined by the framework. So you don't have to specify, hey, go from 0 to there. The chart component does that for you. But I'll come to that after the presentation of the database stuff. I'll give you a hint where you can find the documentation now, because it's no longer just a PDF. It's a great web page that you can use. So from there, to go into the load from JSON data method again, we have to either give the series a name, or, and this is the one I think we're using, what is the name for the points. And then here we go into the value names array, and this is all being extracted from here, from the JSON. So this is something where you need to dig a little bit into the documentation, how to specify the values that you want to extract from your JSON. So if you have a tree structure, you can really do it with this one command, and you can then specify the Y values. So this is the overload here, where you can specify basically the array of the things. This is, during this presentation, it is not something you will understand right away, but just looking at it, because I can show you the complete picture of the JSON, and then at the same time look at the different arrays that are given here. So that is something where you're basically, if you have the source code of the demo, where you can dig into the JSON file and then look at the different parameters here for the JSON data. Important is to take away from this is you have flexible control which of the properties and arrays inside of your JSON documents are being used to generate series and points on that series. You're very flexible there. One thing to note, the difference between using the default load options, which are part of the chart component and are also freed by the chart component, if you create these, you also have to free them, because they're not, if you pass them here to the method, they're being used, but they're not being attached to anything and maintained, managed. So you have to release them after loading. And here, for the different series, after they have been loaded, we're doing some setup that we basically say, hey, the maximum Y offset in percent is 5 to scale the Y and the X axis a little bit. And the auto units is a function that does exactly what I just said. If you have the X values and you have a certain amount of data loaded, that FNC Charts automatically picks the correct X values for that range. So this is, and you have to do that, of course, not only for one series, but for all the series that are being loaded. And that's why we use this very flexible approach to use series.count. Okay, the final one, the data set. Still just looking here, still no question. Okay. The data set. Again, this client data set is just a, basically T client data set is just a placeholder for any T data set, because you can hook any T data set to a data source. And this data source is the standard Delphi T data source, which is available. This is a FireMonkey application. I was quite surprised. I'm not doing a lot of things with FireMonkey, so FireMonkey obviously has a T data source. Correct me if I'm wrong, Peter, but this is the same data source that is also available in the VCL. So you can hook up this data source. And the key is that this T data source in Delphi is the key to all the different database frameworks that are out there. Like FireDAC, you can hook up anything like a query, like a table, to a T data source. And the same thing with the ADO components that are very popular, or even like, I haven't looked at that in years and years and years, but the Zeus library, for example, which we used when we didn't have, when I was still going to college and didn't have the money to buy like an enterprise edition of Delphi, that's what we used to connect to MySQL databases. And that also has a query that is derived off T dataset. So you can hook that up to the data source, and the database adapter is able to take all the data sources. Like you specify here for the source, right here you can specify the data source. And then there's not only two, but this is like the starting point, how you can get used to it. This is how I approached it. With the series, you can either specify manually, or the component automatically creates series for your data set. Let's look at the code for that. And then I'm already running over time. We're 10 more minutes. Time flies, I guess. So first of all, make sure when you make any changes to the underlying data that you close the database adapter, so that it's active to false. And then here, everything that's inside of the series, I want to create everything manually here with code. So I clear everything that's in there, meaning if at design time I added anything in there to test, for example, I clear that all out. And then again, we use default load options this time. We set the X values, format type to date time. We load the dataset. This is a client dataset. If you use FireDAC, for example, you can load any other file format. CDS is the client dataset file format, the binary format. TMS converted this from the Access database that's also inside of this folder. So they literally, I'm quite certain they used the FireDAC component and then stored the client dataset using binary safe to create the CDS file. The dataset is then set to active, the dataset, not the database adapter. It's a difference. We also have to specify the short date format again, because in this database, I can't show you the database because CDS is a binary format, and I don't have access on this machine. The short date format is in this format, and then we can manually add the series to the database adapter, and we say the Y value comes from the database field max, and the X value comes from the database field day. And the Y value for the next series comes from the field min, and the X value, once again, from day. And that's all it takes. And FNC is smart enough to say, oh, okay, I have an X-axis with day, and then I plot max and min. And that's all it takes. And then you set active to true, and boom, there it is. You have your data. That's all it takes. Then the data that's in the data set is visually presented. Okay, we have one more thing I would like to point out. I'm not going to explain it in detail, but there's one more feature in this demo. Everything is customizable, and even the drawing is customizable. And TMS says here the design with comma-separated files. So you see here that the numbers, the higher the number, the redder it gets. That's how I interpret it. And like different colors for different numbers. And if I click it twice, these even disappear, and there is customization in the drawing. Very sophisticated, because events are being called. The main event that TMS loses here is the line chart before draw series marker, and you see everything is customized here. It's intentional being a little bit verbose. Also, what I forget, that when we import the JSON, that we have a JSON add series event that then automatically adds the legend text, if you want to, where that does come from, because like the JSON file, of course, doesn't have the description. So just in case I missed something more, let me look real quick. Here we have, see, we have events, because the JSON data structure doesn't give us the opportunity to add these things. So when we add a series, this is being called, and when we add a point, this is being called. So we can really dig deep into annotating things that is being loaded from the JSON right away. This is not necessary for CSV because obviously all we have is the different columns, and then we can customize the chart using the different series then. So this is just another opportunity to interact right away. You see there's lots and lots of events available, and if you're like, how do I get more information? Of course, there has always been the PDF, but recently TMS started to invest more time into creating online documentation. So if we go to Chrome, which is my web browser here, and I paste this, this should be the link to the FNC chart. So we now have documentation with it getting started right here. And that gets you right started working with FNC charts. New documentation, very different to the PDF, much easier to navigate in there. The only downside is you can't print it as easily anymore. Yes, I know I'm a dying breed, but as far as I know, the PDF is still available, generated based on the online documentation, but you really find things faster by keywords, and the reference lists all the different classes, for example, the database adapter, and all the different chart types. What can a pie chart do? All the different things are being explained very detailed. You can search easily. And this, I think, is between light mode and dark mode, very important. One another accessibility feature the TMS offers, that if you are, if light themes are too bright for you to work with, because it drains the eyes too quickly, this is the way to go. This is the light mode again, so you can switch easily between those two. Okay, so at this point, I'm through with what we've planned today. If there are any questions, ask them now. Otherwise, oh, there we go. I'm not aware of any limitations to web core because FNC components are embedded into TMS web core using a so-called canvas. And that means everything is drawn, just like it's drawn in FireMonkey, just like it's drawn in the VCL. So I don't see any downside to it. The only thing to remember is that, I mean, the chart, of course, is running on the client. If you load data for the chart, that has to be loaded as well from the web server. So that might be a critical thing to consider with regards to limitations, that you can't load megabytes of things. And as Peter just added as well, opacity, but that is rather a limitation, I would think, of the client browser than of the framework itself. So if let's go back to my slide. You can still ask questions. Don't be afraid. I just don't want to forget these things here. So the demo source is available right here. This is the link, and I'm quite sure we can copy that into the chat somehow. No, can't. Okay. But that is something I think, I don't know if there is like this is my first webinar. I don't know if there's an email being sent to you that has these things. But this is the link for the demo source code. And of course, you can always send an email to TMS, support@tmssoftware.com. They'll send it to you for sure. And then there's like a separate blog post. And as estimated, there's one for the version 2.0 announcement. And as far as I know, there's also a separate blog post for the different chart types. And then there is a separate blog post for the grid adapter. I'm 100% certain there was also a blog post about the function plotting for the analytics pack, which is one of the lesser known features. I have to focus on that myself, look into that myself. But the problem for me is I don't have good, I lack the skill to find a nice function to plot. That's the main obstacle for me because I'm not that deep into math in that area. Okay, so if there are no further questions, I really thank you for coming here today. And I'll look over to my other team members. If there's anything to add, please speak now, if I forgot anything. Otherwise, yet again, I thank you very much for coming here today. And if you have any follow-up questions that you can't think of now, or you want to just ask them an email, just email TMS at support@tmssoftware.com. And I hope you saw a few features that you like in TMS FNC Charts 2.0. And yeah, thank you so much, and hope to see you again soon.